Fabulous day. Let me hold on a second here because I'm going to try to bring on my lovely co-host. Rachel is going to come on here in a second. Let me make sure that everything is going on here. Okay. We're going to get started in just a second here. As soon as, okay, there's Rachel. Okay. Rachel, I'm bringing you on. There we go.
Hello, hello.
Hi, I'm trying to change this. I don't like the way this there. I was like, I don't like the way this looked. What is this filter doing? I did not put that on.
How are you doing?
Doing well. My eye's getting better, so that's the good news. I just got back from the eye doctor, so
Oh, good.
75% better. So we're getting there.
That's
Just
good.
a little bit. Yeah, because like Monday, it's good that we didn't do this Monday because
Yeah.
my eye was like huge and swollen, and yeah, it was not fun. It was painful. So it was
Yeah. That's such a crazy situation.
no, it was so yeah, I'm really glad that I'm over the hump now. So I still can't pull my
Oh, good.
butt, but we're getting there. So
Oh,
um,
good.
we are chatting today all about the connection with the thyroid and the adrenals. And I wanted to come on with Rachel. She's such a genius with this stuff. And I was like, oh, this would be fun to chat for a long time about this. So that's why I brought Rachel on. I thought this would be awesome to chat about. And then we're going to just kind of dive into that a little bit. And then we'll do a Q&A at the end. If anyone has questions, you definitely can reach out to either of us as well with more questions. But I thought that this would be a good place for us to start. Anything that you wanted to add, Rachel? I'm going to try and move this.
I don't think so. This is my first time. So thank you guys for joining and apologize for my nervousness. But I'm super excited.
I did this, I cried.
Yeah.
Program. And I was like, I'm so happy to be here. And I'm like, oh, and I started crying on it. I was like,
Oh, no.
yeah, as I was overwhelmed. I'm like, this is not good. So,
Yeah.
So something that Rachel and I both see very, very commonly in both our practices is when people have hypothyroidism, Hashimoto's, whether they've been diagnosed or not, by the way, adrenal connection. And we both do this. We talk ad nauseum with our clients about the stress response and how it's so crucial to address it. Whether you think you're under stress or not, there's a lot of stressors, by the way, which we'll talk about that as well. Why the connection with the thyroid and the adrenals, why it's so important to know that it's there, and then obviously like what you need to do about it. So something that I see super commonly is via testing as well, with doing like Dutch hormone panel. I do hair tissue mineral analysis. Those are the two tests that I will see the biggest connection with the thyroid and the adrenals. But something that I always like talking about is, and I wanted to bring this up first, stress does not have to mean like, oh my gosh, it's such a stressful day. I can't stand it. Like I hate my job and I'm stressed out. And it can be in a lot of different forms. Stress can be food sensitivity. If you eat foods that your stomach's not okay with and your body's not okay with, it can cause a stress response. You can get a stress response just by breathing in like chemicals. It can cause a stress response. So stress, when you get a cortisol release, that is it's a safety mechanism. It's to fight off a stress response. So it can be physical, mental, emotional. There's so many ways to look at stress, but the ones that we need to work on are the ones that we can control the most. So eating
100%.
and yeah, exactly. And that's the tough part. You can't control all stress. Like you literally can't go outside and be like, oh, I'm going to hold my breath so I don't breathe in the chemicals. Like it doesn't work like that. You're going to be exposed to having stress response. That's the whole point of having cortisol. It's to fight off stress. But what you want to do is you want to manage it the best way that you can, so that you can stave off all the effects that happen from being under stress. And then obviously what the thyroid can do. So between like the thyroid and the adrenals, they feed off of each other. One of the analogies that I love using is a triangle. thyroid's in one corner, adrenals in one corner, and sex hormones is on the other. And they all have to play along. And if one's off, they're all off. You have to get them all in check. And hypothyroidism and Hashimoto's, it is very, very common for the adrenals to pay the price when the thyroid's off. And it's also very common for, if you are under an immense amount of stress, for the thyroid to pay the price. And I work with a lot of women, and I'm sure you do too, where it's like, they don't even need to have a diagnosis. Like, you can just hear it in their symptoms, and you see some test results and you're like, yeah, there's some thyroid stuff going on here.
Yeah.
And the majority of the time what I see is, I'm like, so let's talk about stress. And they're like, oh, like they don't even want to talk about it because they know that there's some type of stress. They know, like, yeah, I need to address it, but it's like, that's always a tough topic. It's not a fun one. Like, a lot of people don't want to have to address that. It's a tough one. And the other factor is, like, I know even when I was going through all my thyroid stuff, I was kind of in denial about, I'm fine. Like, I'm not stressed out. Like, I was a little bit in denial about it and not wanting to, like, connect the dots. Like, yeah, your stress is leading to your thyroid being even worse than it already is. So you have to, like, look at that.
Well, and I think it's
anything
yeah, well, I think it's common too that we're like, oh, well, it's normal. Like, you know, I'm a mom, or I work, or I have all these household things to feel like that stress is normal. But if we're not doing anything, not that we're changing any of our stress, but we're helping our body better manage it by doing stress management techniques to just help bring and calm down our body. Let it know that it's okay. Because when we have this underlying stress from work, from relationships, from mom, just being a mom, all these things add up. And so, you know, we get just, it's this underlying stress that we need to start doing small things. It doesn't even have to be that much. It can be 5 or 10 minutes every day that you're just letting your body know it's okay.
Right. And that, because I bring that up to my clients a lot too. I'm like, I don't expect you to sit down and, like, meditate for 4 hours every day. Like, I don't have time for that. But just doing something small for yourself is going to be a stress management way for you. And again, still has to be something that you are, and this is something that I always bring up too. Like, if meditation's not your thing, I'm like, you're going to hate it. Like, you're not going to get anything out of it. Like, it needs to be that you're actually going to enjoy and is a stress relief, and it helps you manage your stress. It does need to be something that you, like, actually enjoy and you get something out of. But just like I do, like, you're always told that, like, it's fine, you're a mom, or it's fine, you know, you're getting older. Like, I was told, actually, when I was in my 20s, I was told by a doctor that I was hitting menopause. And that's why my thyroid was a mess, because I was hitting menopause. I was 24 years old. So I get told things like, it's normal, you're fine, you should be tired, you're a mom. And I'm like, but I shouldn't be, like, physically exhausted where I can't even lift my head off the pillow. Like, that's not okay. And especially, you know, managing stress and stuff like that, like, you are told a lot, like, it's normal to have stress. Like, don't worry about it. It's not a deal. And yes, that's exactly why we have cortisol. We do need it to manage stress. We need a lot of things to manage stress, but there's a line to draw with it. And that's what's not normal. It's when the stress response is over the line, and it's much, it's happening too often. And your body will pay the price. And the thyroid is one of the biggest areas that will, when it comes to stress, if it's left unmanaged and it just goes and goes, it will continue to attack the thyroid. So we're going to kind of go over some things with how that happens. Anything on that?
I think just the only thing is that, you know, I always mentioned on my stories and on my page and stuff that the thyroid is such a sensitive little thing, because, like, everything affects it, whether it's stress or just toxins. There's so many heavy metals and chemicals and things that like to go straight for the thyroid. Yeah. So
it's tough. And the hardest part is not only does the thyroid get affected by everything, it's your master gland.
Controls everything.
You have to be, like, so careful with it and do all the things you can do to nourish it any way that you can. Stress is a tiny part, like, not tiny, like so many other aspects of it, but stress is such a teeny tiny part, but it's a very crucial part. And we talk about it with our clients, because it is can be a missing link for a lot of people too, where they're like, dang it, if I had just, like, done a little bit better job with that, maybe it wouldn't have gotten so it is a piece that I think is so important to address and definitely not ignore. So So one of the big ways that, and not to get too like sciencey, but in your brain, you have, so, and some of you may have heard of the HPA axis. So it's hypothalamic pituitary axis. So there's these little glands in your brain. That is actually where TSH is released. So TSH is thyroid stimulating hormone. That is not actually a hormone. It is actually brain. It is a little hormone that is from your brain and you hormone. So what can happen is under an immense amount of stress when the adrenals are constantly going and it's constantly being released. What can happen is that HPA axis can sort of get dysregulated and it will end up causing TSH to not be released. So you're not releasing enough TSH from the brain to your thyroid to release thyroid hormone. So what happens? Less thyroid hormone. That is just one small way, by the way. There's a lot of happen, but that is one small way to literally get a decrease in thyroid hormone just because you're not getting enough TSH. The tough part is a lot of doctors, when they check like on a blood panel, they won't check anything else. They'll check your TSH. H might actually look okay. You might be like compensating enough that you could still have sort of okay TSH, but you have like every symptom of hypothyroidism. And they're like, no, it's totally fine. You're totally fine. There's no big deal. Your TSH is great. You got to get your thyroid hormones checked. I mean, that's first and foremost, because you still could have sort of okay TSH. The other factor too is, like when you're getting a blood test too, like your TSH might be okay that day, but like maybe in like 2 weeks, it's not. So that's why I'm like, man, you need a full panel first of all. But, it can definitely get, just from stress alone, it can drastically reduce the amount of thyroid hormone. Just that is just one little factor.
Yeah. Well, and even stress can even just affect conversion issues. So like you said, you get TSH checked, but your conversion issues are not good. And, stress can affect that. That's just another, like you said, small part that I mean, they all add up though.
Yeah. And that's the one thing, that's actually one of the ways where I see it probably the most when I'm working with clients too, particularly if I can actually get their doctor to run a full thyroid panel. I have them actually check reverse T3. And so for those of you that don't know what reverse T3, it is not a common marker. They rarely check it. And even when you ask for it, it's like pulling teeth to get them to check reverse T3. So Rachel was talking about thyroid hormone conversion. So you only make like 20% T3. T3 is your actually your active thyroid hormone. T4 is inactive. You have to convert a pretty large percentage of T4 over T3. Probably one of the hardest things to do when you have a slow thyroid. It is not easy to do. It's very, very difficult, especially if you have thyroid antibodies, which is a whole nother subject. But it can make it very hard to convert over. What can happen with stress is under this excess amount of stress, you will have excess cortisol. Cortisol is your fight or flight hormone that gets released by your adrenals. If that continues to happen over and over, is what can happen. Instead of that conversion going from T4 to T3, it reverts it backwards. And that's why it's called reverse T3. So your reverse T3 number will probably be elevated, and your actually active T3 hormone, and they'll check it like free T3, will be bottomed out. It'll be low. So common, big red flag. If you see elevated reverse T3, I don't even have to see what your active T3 is to know. If you have reverse T3 elevated, you're under stress. There is a stress response happening. Now, like I mentioned earlier, it could be because you have a food sensitivity. It could be that you're eating gluten and your body hates it right now, which again, most people with hypothyroidism shouldn't have gluten anyways. But what can happen is, again, any sort of stress to your body will cause that cortisol to be released. And unfortunately, eventually over time, if that keeps happening, it can cause, again, like I mentioned, that reverse T3 will go up. Not a common marker to get checked, but that is one way. If you're talking to your doctor and you're like, I really want a better read of what's going on with a full thyroid panel, that's what I would make sure they're checking too. Because it will tell you like, yeah, your reverse T3 is elevated. You actually do need to manage stress, or we need to do more testing on your adrenals or whatever that may be. But it's such a common one. And it's hard to get them to check it. Not easy to get it checked. There's ways around it, by the way. Like I use at-home test kits. I have people order them, have I'll send them off because it's hard. It's really hard to get them to order it, much less like do anything with it. A lot of times they don't even know what to do with some of the numbers anyways. So that's why they won't order it.
Yeah. Well, and I get asked, quite a bit that, why won't they run them? And, in med school, I went to pharmacy school, and so I've learned about this as well. But yeah, in med school, they are taught to treat off of TSH. So when they run those, they don't, they weren't taught how to, even if with the antibody markers, if they run them, it doesn't change their, how they treat it. So that's,
what else to do? Yeah. And I get asked that a lot. They're like, well, why won't they run it? And I'm like, well, first of all, they're trained on TSH. Sometimes every once in a while T4, but definitely not free T3. Like they don't know what to do with that. And that's not what they're trained on. So they're not going to order tests like, oh, I don't know what to do with it. Even if I do get it back, what do I do with it? So that's, unfortunate, but it's the way it is. It's just the way it is. And so reverse T3 is definitely something to look at for sure. It's not something that you necessarily need to do every single time, but it definitely can give you a really, we got to do a little bit more here with the stress because your reverse T3 up, you definitely are under some stress. And again, when reverse T3 is up, we're not getting active thyroid hormone then, and that's going to make you feel pretty lousy. And if that keeps happening, reverse T3 typically just doesn't go, like it doesn't just magically go back to normal typically. Like you got to physically do some stress management to get that to go, or work with a practitioner, whatever that may be. The other thing too is when you have long-term stress can actually cause like inflammation in the body. Like it can create inflammatory response in the body, which will reduce the sensitivity of like your thyroid receptors. So like where your thyroid cells basically accept thyroid hormone, things like that, and all the receptors, they get less sensitive. And that's another one that I see really commonly. Add Hashimoto's to it, add thyroid antibodies to it, and it's double whammy. Like you just are going to have a really hard time even using the thyroid hormone inside the cells. And that's another thing to consider is you could look like you might have a sort of okay normal thyroid panel. Your T3 might not look terrible, but if you have every single symptom, you might just not be getting the thyroid hormones in the cells. They might not be doing anything. They might just be hanging out. And that's super common. I see it a lot. And that's a tough situation. And that can happen from stress. The stress response alone can do that.
Yeah. Well, and I like to say, like you said, in the blood, like the labs might look normal, but if your body's not able, it's not sensitive and it's not accepting those hormones, the blood levels look great. But if you're still having symptoms, your body is telling you something is wrong. Yeah.
The reason. And I always tell people that I'm like, I don't care how many times your doctor tells you everything looks normal. Do not accept that. If you have symptoms, you don't have symptoms for no reason. There's there for a reason. Your body is telling you something for a reason. If that is happening, you have to be adamant. Like, okay, I want to do a better panel, or I want to dig further. That's when you go to like Rachel or you go to a practitioner and be like, I need to do more testing, or I need to do some other investigating here. I got to, because symptoms should not be there. I do. I mean, and I'm sure you do too. I get women where I'm like, yeah, your thyroid panel doesn't look bad. It's not terrible, but your symptoms are pretty intense relative to that. So there's definitely something underlying. Now, there can be so many other things going on besides obviously stress. Today we're talking about the adrenal connection, but it's a massive connection, and it's definitely that you just can't ignore. We just mentioned several things, several different ways how stress can actually cause a decrease in how your thyroid's working, how your body's using thyroid hormone, all of that. That's just a small part of it. But there's a lot of like facets to it on how you attack, how you approach, how you go about what you can do about the stress response, and then the thyroid connection to it.
Yeah.
I'm looking on here. I think I saw someone with a question.
Okay.
I wanted to get to it before I forgot. How do I know if my adrenal glands are working right? So that's sort of not so easy answer, but easy at the same time. So testing is going to be crucial. That's one of the biggest ways. Obviously, I don't just test and look at a test and I want to correlate it to what your symptoms are. So if your symptoms are, you're thoroughly exhausted, What I see a lot with the women that I work with, and you probably do, Rachel, where they, a lot of times they'll be like, I'm exhausted all day long. And then nighttime comes and they're like, and I'm laying there wide awake. Like you
Mm-hmm.
first, like cortisol pattern, where your circadian rhythm's off. So testing. I mean, that's like, I can't emphasize testing enough.
Yeah.
I use like the Dutch hormone panel. I use adrenal testing that way. I personally like 24-hour read of
Yeah.
adrenal testing, so you can get a really good idea of what's going on with cortisol. There's salivary tests for cortisol too. Again, that's a 24-hour test, but you definitely need to further a panel of your actual adrenal,
Yeah.
see what's going on. There's so much that can play into it. Like I mentioned, you could have where cortisol is too low in the morning and too high at night. You could be like making a ton of cortisol and it's just hanging out. You're not using it, or vice
Mm-hmm.
making none. Like your adrenals are like, I'm out. I'm not making anything.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of interplay with it. There's a lot of connection there to the thyroid too. So yeah, you want to get further testing, and then obviously you need to correlate to symptoms too,
Yeah.
because
100%.
one too. Particularly like if someone's telling me like I lay there wide awake at night, I'm so exhausted all day, and then I'm sitting there late at night and I can't go to sleep. That's always a
Mm-hmm.
red. We probably have some cortisol stuff off here.
Yeah.
You might be having too much at night. Remember, cortisol it follows circadian rhythm. So cortisol, it's an awakening hormone. So it wakes you up in the morning. You're supposed to get a mid-morning spike, and then it drops down, and then it bottoms out at night. And at night times when it's supposed to be low, that's when your body's supposed to go to sleep. So a lot of people with hypothyroidism, it's usually like flip-flop, or it's like this weird, they get this weird spike at the wrong time of the day or whatever. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's so typical where you don't have a normal cortisol pattern. So that's what I would get tested. If you really want to know true response of what your adrenals are doing, that's how I would do it. Sandra, I hope that helps you. Reach out to Rachel if you have more questions with that. But to me, that is probably the most easiest way. And then obviously, you correlate the symptoms still, because that can always kind of hone in on how in depth you should get with that adrenal testing.
Yeah. There's another question about fasting. That's a great question because if you suspect you have adrenal issues, it's really not a good idea to fast because, for one, women with our hormones, we're already super sensitive to fasting. So if you fast too much, it can throw off your hormones. But if you're on adrenal fatigue, it can make that worse. So it's really important to know where you're at as far as adrenals go. Do you have anything to add, Angela?
Yeah, I second that. I get asked all the time about fasting. Intermittent fasting, it's like the craze right now. Everyone's like, oh, I'm going to do intermittent fasting. When first of all, as a woman, it's tough. It's really hard. And like Rachel mentioned, the hormones, it's tough. It's really tough. Now, everyone's very different with it. I have worked with clients where they actually needed to do it because they had hypothyroidism, but they also had diabetes. So there are times where, yes, you might need to do it, but more often than not, what I see is it doesn't work well. First of all, one of the reasons in the connection with hypothyroidism is your liver needs the blood glucose. It does like 60%-ish of thyroid hormone conversion. So inactive T4 to active T3. Your liver does a lot of it. If you don't have enough glucose there, it will not be able to convert thyroid hormone. If you have a slow thyroid, fasting is tough on that, really tough. So that's why you've got to be kind of cautious when you are thinking about fasting. It's not that I'm not a fan of it. There's a time and place for it, but with a slow thyroid, I definitely don't recommend it typically. And then again, if you have kind of hormone stuff going on, it's tough. It's really tough on women. So I would definitely be kind of careful with that. I totally agree with you, Rachel.
Yeah.
Wasn't there a question after that? I think I saw one.
Yeah.
Can day-to-day or week-to-week change results? Are you talking about, Mary, I'm assuming you're talking about adrenals. Are you talking about adrenals or are you talking about like thyroid panel? Let me know on that what you mean by that. For adrenals, yeah, it can change. I mean, if you had a stressful day, like day-to-day can change. As far as if you're talking about like thyroid stuff, day-to-day, not quite as much, but in weeks to weeks, yeah, you could totally see a change in week to week for sure, especially if you are having stress or You know, if you're taking supplements that you're trying to manage your thyroid and stress and all that stuff, like, yeah, it could totally change. But as far as like thyroid numbers, like if you did them today and then did them tomorrow, probably not going to be a massive shift. The only time I actually have seen that, I will say, I did have a client that went to do a full thyroid panel, and she got her thyroid antibodies checked that day. And she went on a gluten binge that day without my advice, and had it checked again the next day by accident. She went to go back because they forgot to do her cholesterol numbers, I think, or something. And they ended up doing the exact same panel again. So she ended up having her antibodies checked again. Her antibodies actually went up. And that was in a 24-hour period. So that was kind of crazy. Yeah. But that's the only time I've ever seen that happen. Other than that, yeah, it usually doesn't happen. Okay.
Thyroid. Do you have any other questions?
Yeah. Mary, did that help you? You were talking about thyroid. Hopefully that helped you. That's typically what's your take on that, Rachel? Same?
Yeah, the same. And sometimes with Hashimoto's, especially with when you're first diagnosed too, when your body's kind of in this, is trying to regulate things, you can see some fluctuations with TSH.
Yeah.
But yeah.
TSH can definitely, like that can fluctuate. And that's one reason why too, I don't let clients, if they are checking blood tests like really often, which doesn't happen often, but sometimes doctors like every 8 weeks, and it's all over the place. And my clients are freaking out, and I'm like, no, it's just TSH. Like that one can't, that kind of fluctuate. It can in the beginning. Once you realize it doesn't fluctuate.
Yeah.
It in a day-to-day, it won't fluctuate that much. But in the beginning, I mean, that one can. T3, T4, not as much, but the antibodies they kind of have a mind of their own sometimes. So
definitely.
Okay.
Do we have any other questions from anybody?
Another one. Yeah. Any tips on where to start with trying to slow hair loss? Oh, I hate this. So I feel so bad for loss. I went like my hair is so long now, but I'm not kidding you. This took me years to grow my hair out. When I was first diagnosed, it was not a fun trip. Diagnosed stable thyroid levels, blood levels, elevated antibodies still. Okay, so elevated, you're still having autoimmune response. That's your body, your autoimmune response. Your immune system is like still talking, so it can make it tough with hair loss. When I work with women in that situation, the hair loss factor, it takes a long time. It is, unfortunately, I'm saying that it's not a quick road. I mean, I did not have Hashimoto's. I only had antibodies present one time, and then they went away. And I still struggled. I mean, it took me forever to get my hair to grow in thicker and longer. With antibodies present, it's a longer road. It's definitely a longer road. Lauren, I'm assuming whether you want to answer this or not, are you doing like all the things to try to help lower antibodies as far as diet aspect goes? Gluten-free, dairy-free, like those types of things. That would be kind of my first thing, is like, you almost got to be pretty religious about that to get those antibodies to come down. I'm glad your thyroid blood levels looks okay, but yeah, when you have elevated antibodies still, you want to do everything you can to try to create the situation where those antibodies come down and where you're working on that immune response from not being elevated. Yeah, hair loss is tough. It's not easy.
Yeah. Well, and with hair loss too, it can be related to the autoimmune and the thyroid issues, but it also can be nutrients. Like, we could have a hard time, especially if you're stressed, your body can have a hard time breaking down foods. So right there, you're not getting the nutrients your body needs. Yeah. And also if you have iron issues, that could also be a factor to take in if you're having hair loss. So there's a lot of things to kind of consider with hair loss.
Yeah. Hormones. I mean, sex hormones, there's a lot of connection. Antibodies is obviously the place to start with that, but there's so many other connections to hair loss. So if you're not having any other symptoms, if it's really like the only thing left really is hair loss, you might want to do some investigating as to, okay, well, is there anything else going on here, like iron, sex hormones, things like that, adrenal profile, anything to look at what else could be doing this hair loss, because there could be other factors there that are doing it besides the antibodies. But if you're more worried about the elevated antibodies, the connection, then yeah, you want to do all the things you can to try to address that. But I would do more investigating otherwise if you're not having any other symptoms other than hair loss. Because yeah, iron's a big one. Iron, even like iodine, I've seen iodine deficiency connected to it. And if there's gut stuff going on and you're not absorbing nutrients from your food, that can be a big, big one. That looked a lot. That one's way overlooked.
Yeah.
That. Definitely not doctors. They're not going to connect that either. But yeah, that's something that I would kind of look at too. Oh, here, hang on. There's another one. All right. My endo says reverse T3 isn't clinically significant, and says my levels are fine. Should I find a new one? Well, if you want me to be honest, yeah, I mean, I'm going to be blunt here. They always say, and Rachel and I talked about this a little bit ago, they always say reverse T3 is clinically insignificant, and because they're not trained on it. Even endos, endocrinologists typically are not trained. They are trained on TSH, sometimes T4, but they aren't trained on the other numbers. So a lot of times they don't know what to do. So that's why they usually do say it's clinically insignificant. So honestly, like I mentioned earlier, you don't need to get reverse T3 checked every time, but I think there needs to be a baseline. I think you still need to see it at least once a year. I would see a baseline of where you're at with your reverse T3. I would still demand it. If they will not, couple options. One, new doctor. Like, I want this checked and demand it. I will tell you, one, my 15-year battle where no one listened to me, every doctor I went through 7 doctors. By my 8th doctor, I finally got one to listen to me. Sad but true. It was not a fun journey, but I had to do that because I'm like, I want this checked. I know something's wrong here. So that could be an option. The other option is you just do an at-home test kit. There are a lot of options out there where you can add on reverse T3 as an add-on. Paloma Health has the reverse T3. That's one that you could do. But there's options. There's definitely options. I would still, if you really want your full thyroid panel done, I would still demand it. And if the endo's like, no, I'm not doing it, find one that will. Unfortunately, it's not easy. They're not easy to find. To do it, like Rachel mentioned earlier, they're not trained on that, but I would still demand it. And if not, then there's options. You know, you can get one at home. Insurance doesn't cover it, but like I have codes. There's codes you can find online to get those discounted. I think the Paloma Health, if it's your first time ordering from them, they'll do like $30 off your first kit. And it's easy to do. So that's always an option too. But yeah, I would demand it. I would demand it. And if not, I'd be like, time for a new doctor. I mean, it's unfortunate, but it's the way it is. It's your body. And I would I still want it checked. You may tell me all day long, well, if they do think it's clinically significant, but what if you think it's significant? Go for it then. Still demand it.
Yeah. Well, and if they do run it for you, always request a copy because you know they might say, "Oh, you're within range, you're good," but it might be in range, but you're not optimal. So it's always good to get a copy.
Like you, Christine, you said on here, my levels are fine. Demand your panel first of all, but what's fine? Like they tell you, oh, you're normal, and then I look at the labs and I'm like, that's not normal. Like their reference ranges, the typical conventional medicine reference ranges are terrible. They are not what make people feel good. They're just what the reference ranges on an average person. From all the lab results. So it's usually not a good lab. It's not usually going to be a good reference range. So demand that. Rachel and I both have information on that too. If you have questions with that of what reference ranges should look like, reach out to either of us because we'll definitely give you info on that. On these are what your reference ranges should actually look like. Because their reference ranges are typically not good and they tell you like, it's fine. It looks fine. Your reference ranges look fabulous. Don't worry about it. Everything looks great. They told me that forever. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, these are not fine. And then you're sitting there miserable and you have symptoms and they're like, everything looks great. And you're like, oh, awesome.
They're great.
This all the time. Your symptoms might be common, but that's not normal. You should have symptoms. I don't care. You should still not have symptoms.
Yep.
How can you decrease hair loss? We were just talking about this. So I'll kind of recap like some of the stuff we said earlier. the big one, if you're thinking thyroid connection, first of all, full thyroid panel. You need to know what all your numbers are. So full thyroid panel, by the way, is TSH, free T3, free T4, reverse T3, not easy to get, and then your thyroid antibodies, which would be your TPO and TGAB. So I would get those checked. That would be the first place to start. You want to see a full picture of your thyroid. The other factor is you might have some other things connected to it. Sex hormones is a big connection. Gut health is a really big connection. So being sure you're avoiding inflammatory foods is a great place to start. Avoiding gluten, sugar, dairy for some. A lot of people really do actually have issues with dairy. All these inflammatory foods, even soy, can be issues for people and cause that response, like an autoimmune response almost. So you could start there. Iron's one, iodine's one. I mean, it's a lot. It's really hard to say, give specific things, but blankly, yeah, there's a lot involved with hair loss, unfortunately. Nutrient deficiencies, mineral imbalances, you name it. And that's why Rachel and I work with so many clients on this, because it's not usually a one-facet approach. It is a multifaceted approach. There's usually, and that's why we love working with women too, because you got to take like a full picture. Like there typically isn't just, oh, it's that one thing that's causing my thyroid to be slow, or that's one thing causing my hair to be, falling out or thinning. There's usually a lot more involved to it. So I would take it that way, but first and foremost, make sure you're getting full thyroid panel if you haven't done that yet. Rachel, what are your thoughts? I'm sure you have stuff to add.
Yeah, no, I was just thinking that, yeah, usually I tell my clients and just, people on my page that reach out to me, always start with the basics, because if you start trying to do all these things, then you get just overwhelmed. So start with the basics, your nutrition, like eating those foods, like cutting out the inflammatory foods, adding in more anti-inflammatory foods. So you're getting those nutrients that your body needs, and then focusing on the stress management and sleeping, getting enough sleep or good quality sleep. Those are the basics. Focus on those. And then as you get those in a routine and you're feeling more comfortable with those, start looking into these other, switching out your products to clean ones, looking at heavy metals or adrenal dysfunction, different things that could also be causing it. But don't overwhelm yourself with like, oh my gosh, I have to do like 20 different things.
I know. And that's the tough part. I mean, I know my journey, that's kind of how I wanted to do it. And I'm like, it doesn't work like that. And you will overwhelm yourself. Start with basic, like Rachel said, and start with something that is going to be a sort of an easier transition for you. If the food aspect is easier for you to start with, so let's start with that. But if you try to do it all at once, it's like overwhelming, like it's tough. So I definitely don't recommend that, but basics is good. The other thing too, that just reminded me, like you talking about, like even liver, gut, stuff like that. So liver, I mentioned earlier, like 60-ish% of thyroid hormone conversion happens there. Over 20% happens in the gut. So that's an area why you can't really ignore gut health, particularly with thyroid involved. You can't ignore it because there's a big connection there too for thyroid hormone conversion. And then obviously how you're going to break your food down, absorb the nutrients, all that. So food is so, so crucial. It is so, so crucial. And some people don't want to hear that. Not easy to do, but at the same time, to me, that is the one, like you can control that one the easiest. You don't have to think about like, am I doing this right or am I doing this wrong? The big thing is take the inflammatory foods out, put anti-inflammatory foods in. That's a great place to start. That's where I have everyone start, is let's look at your food first. If we're just blankly looking at things without testing, let's start with your food first. Let's start there. If sleep is that might be bothering you the most, start there. But it's going to baby steps. You got to baby step it. It's too overwhelming otherwise.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. All right. My body has been experiencing being cold all the time, sensitivity to certain foods. What blood test should I ask to get? So this is like so common with hypothyroidism, is to feel cold all the time. And I actually work with women who are like, I feel cold all day long, and then I'm hot as heck at night. That's probably some hormone stuff involved too. But a lot of times, hypothyroidism, Hashimoto's, they usually do feel like you're cold all the time. Sensitivity to certain foods is very common as well. Um, if you're thinking about blood tests, it's hard. I mean, obviously if you're thinking about thyroid, a thyroid blood panel is where I would start as far as blood testing goes. Um, it's hard for blood testing, like gut testing. If you're thinking about something like that for gut testing, that needs to be a stool test. There are blood tests that can do for food sensitivity testing. If you want to know more about food sensitivity testing, then you can do that via blood. You would probably have to work with a practitioner. That's hard to get a reliable test. If you're looking at food sensitivities, that's not an easy one to do without working with a practitioner if you want a reliable one. Blood testing, I do not do for anything like when you're thinking about like gut infections or things like that. Anything else going on in the gut, I do stool testing for that. But if you're looking at blood testing, you're thinking about blood testing as far as a thyroid panel, ask your doctor to run it because your insurance will probably cover it. Like I mentioned earlier, but you've got to ask for a full thyroid panel. So again, if you want more information on that, ask us what that is. But it's TSH, free T3, free T4, reverse T3, and then your thyroid antibodies. So it's thyroid peroxidase, so TPO, and then thyroid globulins, TGAB. That's a full panel to me. Now, there's other things you can definitely add on, vitamin D, iron, like there's all kinds of things that you can add on. But if you're truly trying to get your doctor to do just the basics for a thyroid panel, that's kind of where I would start as far as a blood test goes. I hope that helps you. I don't know if that answered your question. I tried. Yeah, she said, reference ranges have changed a lot through decades due to various factors. Oh my gosh, the reference ranges have changed a lot. A lot of factors involved. But yeah, reference ranges are tough too, because to me, like for me personally, I was in reference range a lot and I was miserable. I was so miserable. My test kept looking okay. And I was like, I cannot function. Like they would not listen to me. Your tests look great. So reference ranges are tough because you could fall in the reference range. It doesn't mean you're using the thyroid hormone. It doesn't mean you're taking the nutrients out of the food and using them. So there's a lot of factors to that. Do you have a list of tests on your IG somewhere? I do not. This is Mary. I do not have on my IG like an actual list of tests, but send me or Rachel, send us a DM and we can kind of help you with that, like what I would recommend. I'm assuming you're talking about other testing besides like the thyroid blood test. Let me know on that. For me, I mean, there's a lot of different tests that you can do with that, but let me know what you mean on that, Mary, if that's what you're referencing. I'm assuming that's what you're talking about as far as other testing.
Yeah, and for me, like it usually depends on symptoms for what labs I might recommend. And I don't know if this is the same for you, Angela. I mean, obviously there's those people out there that are like, I just want to test everything, and that's great too. But if there's, financial constraints or whatever, then we just go off of, symptoms.
Yeah, same thing. Particularly if someone's like, their gut is a train wreck and that's their worst symptom, we're going to go with stool testing right away. I mean, do every single test on them right off the bat if there's a financial, because it's not cheap doing all that. So yeah, I always correlate to symptoms. Like, let's start here. I think this is a great place to start.
Yeah.
Sleep is huge. Wish I could have realized in my 20s and 30s. Tell me about it. I know. I would too. You're in your 20s and you're just like, I don't need sleep. It's overrated. And now I'm like, oh gosh, if I could go back to old self and be like, get your sleep, listen to your body and go to sleep, I would totally. You are so right. Starting off with the common sense things. Yep. Start with basics. I mean, the big thing is you can't overwhelm yourself. Otherwise you're not going to do it. It's hard to stick with if you think my question. Oh my God. I would love a one-on-one with you ladies. Oh, we love it too.
Thank you.
We love doing one-on-ones. I've been off work since March due to thyroid, adrenal fatigue. I feel my hormones are also something else. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. It's hard. And when I was going through all my struggles and doctors not listening to me and stuff, I was practicing as a physical therapist at the time. And I was running a clinic and I was like, I don't think I can work. Like I couldn't function. I was miserable. I couldn't stay awake. I was napping any chance I could get. And like, how you feel when you come out of a nap. and I had to go right into like treat another patient. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I was exhausted. So it is not fun. I feel for you. I'm really sorry that you're struggling with that. It's tough, and they're all connected.
Yeah.
All sex hormones, thyroid, that's all connected. So definitely do some investigating. I would do some digging on that.
Definitely.
Let me see. I think that was it. We had some good questions. There's a little dot down here. I want to see what this is. Oh, here's a question down here. If your thyroid has been radioactively treated, are you still affected by stress? Yep. Yep. You're no matter what's going on, whether you have a thyroid present or not, whether it's been radioactive or not, stress can still affect you. Either way, like stress will still affect you because you still have to have thyroid hormone even when you don't have a thyroid. You know, you're getting it from medication or whatever. Your body still has to operate that way. So stress will still affect you regardless. You will have other things affected via stress, whether the thyroid's there or not. Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, well, and I was thinking too, the reason why you had to have the radioactive is probably because of hyperthyroid.
Right.
So there was
Right.
a reason why your body was, I guess, compensating for that hyperthyroid. Why was
Right.
your body why was your thyroid acting that way? So you had to get that.
Yeah.
So there's always a reason. There's always a root cause why your body's kind of out of balance.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because I actually just started working with a client who she is very young, and her doctor took her whole thyroid out because she was hyperthyroid. She wasn't Graves, but she was really hyperthyroid, and she had some nodules and stuff. So he was like, I'm just going to take it out. Never said anything to her about anything after the fact, like lifestyle, nothing. And she's like, I don't even know how to function now. I don't know how to do any of this stuff. She's like, it's crazy because he's like, never talked about stress, never talked about gut, never talked about anything. And she has no thyroid at all. And I'm like, God, it's such an important factor to that too. Like, but why was your body doing that? Your body was doing it for some reason.
Yeah.
So now your thyroid's not there, but your body still remembers why it was doing that. So you still express all of it. Like, what was it doing? So super important.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that was it. We had some awesome questions, like really good questions.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.
I'm going to scroll through here just to make sure I didn't miss anything. Thanks for answering my question. I think that was it. Yeah, we totally had some really good questions today. Yeah, and if any of you that ask questions on here, if you guys want more information or you have more questions or whatever, or the question wasn't answered enough, definitely reach out to Rachel and I. Let us know.
Yeah.
If there's something that you're like, no, I need some help with this, or questions or whatever. Like, we're always happy to chat. I'm in DMs all the time, and I know Rachel is too.
Yeah. We love connecting with you guys, so
I know.
reach out anytime.
Fun. I love connecting with people on here too. It's always fun. And you get some cool questions on here too. So it's good. And I always like it too, because like, especially if you're like coaching with someone, it's nice to see a face. It's talk to someone. So
yeah.
All right. I think that was it. Like I said, if anybody else has questions, I don't know what there's a button down here that I don't know what that is. So I don't know. I had another little thing that popped up, but I can't, it's not doing anything. So if I'm missing someone, let me know.
Yeah, and I'm no help because this is the first time I've done this. So.
Well, and I get like they changed this on here. So the buttons moved. So when I was on here the other day doing it, I'm like, oh my gosh, they moved buttons again. Now where's the button?
Yeah.
Things on here a lot. So sometimes I get confused. All right. I think that's it. So this replay will be on, I'm going to download it and Rachel will have it too, but this replay will be on that little, well, and now again, they changed that too, by the way. Used to be that little IGTV, little looking TV thing. And now it's a triangle. So it looks very different. But that's where this will be saved into the IGTV, where the IGTV area used to be. That's where it will be. So you guys can always go back and watch it. And then reach out to Rachel and I if you have more questions. All right.
Sounds good.
Anything?
Thanks, Sandra. I don't think so. I think it was fun.
It was
Thanks
fun.
for having me.
Absolutely. You're welcome, you guys. Thanks for coming on. Bye.
Bye.